I'm going to turn now to the issue of the NSA and the revelations that have just come out with the British government. The British government now is under fire for its detention of David Miranda, the partner of journalist Glenn Greenwald, who has exposed all of these stories on NSA surveillance based on the leaks of Edward Snowden. Miranda has just announced legal action against the British Home Office for his detention at London's Heathrow Airport. He was held on Sunday as he passed through Heathrow on his way home to Brazil, where he and Greenwald live. Miranda was detained under Schedule 7 of Britain's Terrorism Act, which allows police to hold someone at an airport for up to 9 hours for questioning about whether they're involved in acts of terrorism. He was detained for the full 9 hours allowed and finally released after British authorities seized his mobile phone, laptop, cell phone, and USB thumb drives. Miranda had been in Germany visiting U.S. filmmaker Laura Poitras, who works with Greenwald in reporting on the files leaked to them by Edward Snowden. His flights were paid for by The Guardian, and a spokesperson for the newspaper says he often assists with Glenn Greenwald's work. Glenn Greenwald told the New York Times Miranda was in Berlin to deliver documents to Poitras related to his investigation into government surveillance and get other documents from Poitras to bring back home.
On Monday, Miranda described his ordeal upon his return to Brazil.
I stayed in a room with 3 different agents. They were entering and exiting. They spoke to me, asking me questions about my whole life. They took my computer, my video game, cell phone, everything.
In a statement, the Brazilian government said Miranda's detention is, quote, without justification. What they said was, the statement was, is without justification, since it involves an individual against whom there are no charges that can legitimate the use of that legislation. The Brazilian government expects that incidents such as the one that happened to Miranda today do not repeat. Greenwald himself said the detention would not deter him from future reports.
I will be far more aggressive in my reporting from now on. I'm going to publish many more documents. I'm going to publish things on England, too. I have many documents on England's spy system.
The press freedom group Reporters Without Borders issued a statement in response to Miranda's detention that read, quote, the world's most repressive states often identify journalism with terrorism, and now the British authorities have crossed a red line by resorting to this practice. By acting in this arbitrary way, the British authorities have just emphasized how necessary and legitimate Snowden and Greenwald's revelations were. Meanwhile, on Monday, the White House confirmed it was notified before Miranda was taken into custody. This is White House Deputy Secretary Josh Earnest.
There was a heads-up that was provided by the British government. So this is something that we had an indication was likely to occur, but it's not something that we requested, and it's something that was done specifically by the British law enforcement officials there. The United States was not involved in that decision or in that action. So if you have questions about it, then I would refer you to the British government.
The detention of Glenn Greenwald's partner led his newspaper, The Guardian, to reveal another explosive revelation of media intimidation by the British government. On Monday, The Guardian editor, Alan Rusbridger, revealed the British government threatened legal action against the newspaper unless it either destroyed Snowden's classified documents or handed them to British authorities. Rusbridger says that after The Guardian published several stories based on Snowden's material, a British official advised him, quote, you've had your fun, now we want the stuff back. 2 officials from the GCHQ, the NSA's British counterpart, then visited The Guardian's London offices and looked on as computers containing Snowden's material were physically destroyed. Rusbridger said The Guardian agreed to destroy the hard drives, knowing the paper's reporters can continue their work abroad. He wrote, quote, we will continue to do patient, painstaking reporting on the Snowden documents. We just won't do it in London. Well, for more, we're joined by Jacob Appelbaum, computer security researcher, developer, and advocate for the Tor project, a system enabling its users to communicate anonymously on the Internet. He's been stopped and questioned numerous times while traveling. We will also be joined by the longtime British attorney, Gareth Pearce, who is on the phone with us. But Jacob Appelbaum, let's begin with you. Can you respond to what happened to David Miranda at Heathrow Airport?
Sure. Effectively, what we know right now is that the British government has used anti-terrorism legislation inappropriately, as it specifically is the case that when they hold someone under this legislation, they are only supposed to do so to determine if, in fact, they can make an arrest. The fact that he was flagged before he even got on the airplane and that the U.S. was notified suggests that it was a completely unlawful detention, even under this legislation. So they're even breaking their egregiously unethical, immoral laws, which is terrible, and for David, I feel for him, having experienced that many times.
Well, Jacob, can you tell us about your own story, your own experience? And in fact, in this case, you have particular insight because you've been detained, and also your partner has been detained as well, as also occurred to Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, to describe this process, this is a process of intimidation, right? Working with Der Spiegel here in Germany, where I am now, I would not want to undergo this process again. So I, for example, am not with you in New York today, specifically because these kinds of intimidation tactics, they work to a degree. And that is to say, when you're held in a room, told that you're a terrorist, your property is stolen, you are denied access to your lawyer, as is the case with David, these kinds of things, they really impact you. And they impact family members, they impact friends and friendships, and they, of course, impact the relationship with a source. It's extremely difficult to maintain source confidentiality and to be able to keep a promise, which is the core of journalistic integrity, when these types of things are taking place.
I wanted to bring Gareth Peirce into this conversation. Gareth Peirce is the British attorney who's represented a number of Guantanamo prisoners. Speaking to us on the telephone now, can you explain what this Schedule 7, this Section 7 of the British law is, and how it was that David Miranda was held under this terrorism clause?
From what one can judge, the stopping and use of the Schedule 7 provision of the Terrorism Act, in his case, is completely unlawful, was unlawful, is unlawful. The power given at a point of entry, at a port, and only at a port, is for a police officer or an immigration officer to have an unusual degree of power. However, it's limited. It allows that officer to satisfy himself or herself that the person he's examining is not directly involved in the instigation, commission of acts of terrorism. It's very specific, and that person has to be the suspect. It's an unusual power in that it doesn't allow the person to have a right against self-incrimination. It's the one point within the jurisdiction in which you are required, if you are the interrogatee, to answer questions on pain of a criminal penalty if you fail to answer. So you're required to answer, and it's for that very specific purpose. Now, if it's used for an ulterior motive, then it's unlawful. And there have been succession of legal challenges to its use. It's not the first time that those stopping someone have done so to put questions from another agency or for the purpose of trying to put right an inquiry that was based upon torture of that individual abroad, trying to effectively launder the interrogation through some more jurisdictionally friendly means. But the courts have said an ulterior motive, an ulterior purpose is not permitted. And it's absolutely clear, how can those who stopped Mr. Miranda, how can they possibly have said that they required to satisfy themselves that he was not directly involved in instigation or commission of acts of terrorism?
Gareth Peirce,
miles from...
I wanted to go to yesterday's news conference at the White House. This is a reporter questioning Josh Earnest, the White House spokesperson.
You've talked about the Mubarak detention as being an Egyptian legal matter. You talk about Morsi, politically motivated detention. And then with regard to Mr. Greenwald's partner, you called it a mere law enforcement action. Given that the White House has never been shy about criticizing detention policies overseas, do you have any concerns at all about the UK's law enforcement action in this case?
Well, what I can say is I don't have a specific reaction other than to observe to you that this is a decision that was made by the British government and not one that was made at the request or with the involvement of the United States government.
So, but you're not going to go as far as to say it's wrong or is cause for concern. You're just separating yourself entirely from it.
Well, I'm separating. What I'm suggesting is that this is a decision that was made by the British government without, without the involvement and not at the request of the United States government.
That was the spokesperson at the White House, Josh Earnest. Gareth Pierce, if you could respond to that, and also this extraordinary story that The Guardian has just revealed, that they were forced to destroy the hard drives that had the Snowden documents on them, the documents that he had leaked.
Well, I think that the attempted deniability of the involvement of our two governments jointly or mutually lacks credibility now at this point of time, given the primacy with which our intelligence agencies have been unlawfully conducting surveillance on all of our citizens. However, it is an improper purpose if another government is feeding in questions and obtaining the product of those questions for purposes that are not defined by the statute, and these cannot have been defined. But you can bet your boots that Mr. Miranda's phone was taken, its contents copied, any computer he had would have been taken, its contents copied, and even if they're given right back at the conclusion of the 9-hour detention, it's not arrest. It's not arrest. It's a detaining, keeping someone for the purpose of examining them. If the police have a reasonable suspicion, they arrest you and have to arrest within 9 hours. But that didn't happen here. And any challenge to this detention would undoubtedly involve a questioning as to the purpose. And if the purpose were revealed, as it has been in more than one legal challenge, to be simply for the purpose of obtaining information of a wide-ranging kind, that makes it unlawful and will be an interesting exercise were Mr. Miranda to pursue it from now on in. To the Guardian, maybe they are conducting a tactical manoeuvre, I know not, in order to. It wouldn't be the first time that the authorities have gone for Guardian documentation. They did it a long time ago and used a particularly clumsy mechanism of a production order that the Guardian successfully withstood. However, I don't know their reasoning, and I wouldn't comment on that.
We're going to break and come back to this discussion. And Gareth Pierce, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Well-known British attorney, has represented a number of prisoners at Guantanamo, among others. We're also speaking with Jacob Applebaum, who is in Berlin, which is where David Miranda was, which is where Laura Poitras is working. As Jacob points out, he cannot come into the United States right now, or is concerned if he does, what will happen to him. He's a computer security researcher. We'll